Park funded by District 1 and 3 recreation funds. I do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 5 is recommend participation in the National Association of Counties, NACO, prescription discount card program and authorize execution of relevant documents. Do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 6, recommend release of mortgage for 3-acre parcel, including a 15,000 square foot building in Santa Rosa Industrial Park in foreclosure to Hancock Bank. Do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 7 is recommend certificate of participation in the 2013 Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE, Bernie Memorial Justice Assistant Grant, state solicitation in the amount of $51,149 and designate Lieutenant Butcher of the Sheriff's Office as the point of contact. I do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 8, recommend settlement agreement in the amount of $50,000 for workers' compensation claim of former deputy sheriff as recommended by risk management and county attorney. Do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 9 is recommend resolution granting temporary construction easement to the Florida Department of Transportation for improvements on State Road 87 and Munson Highway intersection. Do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 10, recommend extension of the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity contract for 2012 CDBG grant for Baghdad Sewer Extension project through January 31st, 2014. I do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 11 is recommend following appointments for District 4, J.R. Williamson, Electric Code Board of Appeals, Claude Duvall, Fire Protection Board of Appeals. I do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 12 is recommend designation of Commissioner Cole as credential delegate to the National Association of Counties Conference. I do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. And I do have a couple caveats to add to that, if you'll give me just a moment, please. And there's two to this. I just handed out to the rest of the board, and we have copies for the public if they'd like them. One of the items on there is voting for second VP. I've met all these folks at the spring conference in Washington, D.C. My recommendation is going to be Stan Bateman. He's the chairman of St. Clair County, Alabama. After looking at the people that are on the board and the candidates there, my feeling was to keep somebody from the South on this board. We're getting outnumbered on the board at NACO. Plus Stan was very active. As you can see, I got you back up here for all the candidates. We have time to decide this before the next meeting, before I attend NACO, so it was just something I want. You know, if during your course of looking at these by the next meeting you have any concerns that you'd like to bring to the board, let's do so then. So we'll kind of hold off on final decision on that one. The one that does require a little bit more expedient action, unfortunately, it was Tuesday, June 11, 2013 at 4:54 p.m. that I received this from NACO. And it's a reminder that the NACO policy resolutions are due next week. The deadline is June 19th, and of course we won't as a board meet again before then. My suggestion is the only resolution that we present to NACO would be continued support of the Restore Act as written, and I would like board approval to go ahead and have the county attorney draft it as indicated in the instructions here from NACO and submit that for policy approval at NACO. So I'll do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. All right, we'll move on now. All right, item number 13 is recommend use of roadways around Spencer OLF for a second annual Run for Water 5K event Saturday, September 14th, 2013, from 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. I do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 14, recommend use of the courthouse ground and parking area July 4th, 2013 for the annual July 4th Riverfest events to include a temporary no-wake zone designation for a portion of the Blackwater River as requested by the Santa Rosa County Chamber of Commerce. Do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 15 is recommend authorization of application for U.S. Justice Department Bernie Memorial Grant local solicitation in the amount of $14,313 requiring no local match. I do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 16 is recommend assignment of Gulf Power Company lighting services contract from Florida Department of Transportation for Phase 1 of US 98 street lighting project and authorize execution of all related documents. I do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 17 is meetings, and unless otherwise noted, they are here in this room. The meetings are listed for you both on the internet and on hard copies. So note those meetings if you intend to attend those meetings. We'll go now to engineering report. Item number 1 is recommend work order number 003 in the amount of $14,740 to contract with Hatchmont McDonald Engineering for design modification T-hanger project as required by changes to the Florida Building Code. I do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 2 is recommend task order 29 not to exceed $53,400 to the contract with CH2M Hill for design of Fairpoint water main rehabilitation project for the Navarre Beach utility system. I do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 3 is recommend proposal from Beard Equipment in the amount of $10,421.12 for undercarriage replacement for a landfill bulldozer based on comparative shopping. I do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. Item 4 is recommend acceptance of paving of 277 linear feet plus or minus of Romano Street. Do so without objection. Hearing none, it passes. This time we'll go to Commissioner Lynchard for Public Service Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 1 is recommend modification to the contract with the Florida Division of Emergency Management for extension of Homeland Security Grant Agreement through June 30th, 2013, and authorize execution of related documents. I move approval without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
Item 3 is recommend submission of annual Citizen Corp grant in the amount of $15,000 with Florida Division of Emergency Management utilizing in-kind services as local match. And I move approval without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
Item 3 is recommend subordination of mortgage agreement for ship rehabilitation loan in the amount of $7,404 for the property located at 3844 Hazel Godwin Road, consistent with board policy, and I do so without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
Item 4 is recommend subordination of mortgage agreement for ship rehabilitation loan in the amount of $7,500 for the property located at 5104 Bradford Drive, consistent with board policy, and I do so without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
Item 5, recommend interlocal agreement with Escambia County for federal transit funding of the Veterans Transportation Initiative grant and authorize execution of related documents. I do so without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
And item 6 is recommend equipment lease agreement with Pensacola Bay Transportation for 4 vehicles providing transportation disadvantaged services in Santa Rosa County, and I do so without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
Item 7, recommend submission of Section 5310 Capital Assistance Grant for elderly and people with disabilities with the Florida Department of Transportation for replacement vehicles for Transportation Disadvantage Program, and I do so without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
That concludes Public Services, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Lane. At this time, we'll go to Public Works Committee. Commissioner Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 3 items today. The first item is recommend construction of multi-use path on East Bay Boulevard, County Road 399, from U.S. Highway 98 to Shadow Lake subdivision at an estimated labor and material cost of $217,315, funded by the Area 3 impact fees. And I move approval without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
Item 2 is recommend resurfacing 22 roadways throughout the county at an estimated cost of $1,355,425, funded by road and bridge reserves. And I move approval without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
The last item is recommend construction of 850-foot extension to the right turn lane on Ward Basin Road at East Milton Elementary School, contingent upon the school board reimbursement of material cost estimated at $25,000. And I move approval without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jim. At this time, we'll go to Budget and Finance. Commissioner Melvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 5 items this morning. Item number 1 is recommend budget amendment 2013-129 in the amount of $996,730, which will recognize the HMGP grant and local match funding for Phase 2 construction of Bramblewood Drive HMGP Stormwater Project, and I recommend approval without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
Item number 2 is budget amendment 2013-130 in the amount of $670 for military-related expenses associated with Northwest Florida Coalition trip to Washington and the Florida Defense Support Task Force meeting, and I recommend approval without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
Item number 3 is budget amendment 2013-131 in the amount of $714,500 for Economic Development Transportation Fund, the EDTF. It's a grant for construction of a rail spur in the industrial park servicing Gulf Cable and Gold Ring Distribution Incorporated, and I recommend approval without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
Item number 4 is budget amendment 2013-132 in the amount of $10,000, which will carry forward funds for the Navarre Fishing Rodeo from the Tourist Development Fund, and I recommend approval without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
Item number 5 is recommend the county expenditures and check register. I reviewed those documents and signed off on them. They're on your desk for your signature. I recommend approval without objection.
Hearing none, it passes.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. All right, anything else to come before the board this morning? Staff or board members? Anything from the general public? If not, we're adjourned.
This guy is a real good guy.